Hi everyone, this is Fran Penberthy again, and the great British summer is still upon us, isn't it? So I bet most of us were out in our gardens at the weekends, just whipping out the barbecue and cooking up our favourite meals. So today, really quickly, I just want to look at two factors that you need to be aware of when you're cooking meat on the barbie, because those factors greatly increase our risk of developing cancer. I know that's heavy, so I also want to tell you about 5 simple tweaks that you can make to that barbecue meat that hugely reduces those risks. So, what are the two factors? Well, there are two classes of chemicals that are generated through the way that we cook meat on the barbie. Because it's an intense heat, isn't it? It's much higher than when we're cooking in the kitchen. And this is where the problem comes, because one class of chemicals, and they're known by their initials, which is HCAs, they are generated with the muscle meats, you know, like your steaks and your chicken and the pork and the fish. When they are cooked with really high heat, there are chemical changes that happen to the amino acids and the sugars and the creatine in that muscle meat that actually produce these really harmful chemicals. The second class, again known by initials, which is PAHs, and I'm not even going to attempt to tell you what they stand for, because you know me and long words don't go together. So these PAHs, they're generated when the meat is sitting on the barbie and the fat is dripping through into the coals. And so then the flames that leap up and the smoke that rises have these PAHs in them, and as they rise, they stick to the meat. So these are the two kind of chemicals that are just, and the reason that they increase the risk of cancer is because they actually cause changes deep down in our DNA, and that is what increases the risk of cancer. So that's the bad news. So what do? Do we stop having barbies? Absolutely not. What we can do instead is these 5 simple tweaks that actually reduce the risks by a massive sort of 60%, even up to 90% reduction of risk. So, and that's just from 5 simple changes that you can make to the way that you cook the meat on the barbie. So number 1 is to not leave the meat cooking the whole time on the barbie, but actually pre-cook the meat in the oven and then just finish it off on the barbie. Reduce time, reduce risk. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that you, while the meat is on the barbecue, that you continually turn it. You keep it on the move. You don't let it just sit there. Number 3, you can wrap the meat into like some foil parcels, and that will hold that fat in there so that it's not dripping into the coals and producing those PAHs. Number 4, and I love this one, this is probably my favourite. Number 4 is that if you marinate the meat for several hours before you barbecue it, you have just produced a massive amount of protection to that meat. So and let me say here that it's not the shop bought barbecue sauces, because they've actually been found in studies to actually increase the production of these chemicals, and possibly that's because of the amount of sugars that are in these sort of pre-packed sauces. But no, make your own marinades and use things like extra virgin olive oil, you know, lemon juice, you know, different types of vinegar, garlic. They've even found certain types of fruit also are quite protective. I mean, you know, if you can get some cherries into your beef burgers, they're actually really protective. So, you know, if you marinate that meat for several hours before, it's almost like you've put an invisible force field on that meat, and when it's on the barbie, it is so much more protected from making those chemicals. So I love that one. And the last one is number 5. When you've cooked the meat on the barbie, if any of it is charred, if there are any black bits over brown bits, don't eat those, because they will be full of these very damaging chemicals. So cut off any of the charred pieces of meat. Don't go for those. Only eat the meat that's just carefully cooked. So they were my 5 simple tweaks, and I hope that you have enjoyed those, because please remember that we do need to nourish our bodies, we need to feed our spirits, and we need to capture our thoughts, because if we can get all 3 in line, we will be unstoppable.